Welcome to our 34th podcast. Today we'll be continuing our discussion about managing change in remote or hybrid work environments. Didn't get enough ideas from last time? Want one more thing you can do now to make your change initiatives succeed in remote or hybrid environments? Keep listening to this episode. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Thanks for joining us again today. My name is Rich Cruz. I'm an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben.
Hey, everyone.
And Cheryl Volpe.
Hi, everyone.
Cheryl. And we are continuing our discussion today on navigating change in remote or hybrid work environments. So a little bit of a recap of what we were talking about the last time, right? Well, first of all, this remote and hybrid thing, while it is talked about a lot, it's not really new, right? We've had some innovations throughout the years, but this stuff's been around since the 90s. The last time we talked, we brought up Mrs. Fields and how this cookie company set up an intranet, their own private network, so to speak, that connected all these different stores so they could manage their finances and their communications in a centralized fashion. We also talked about some signaling and communication theory and information asymmetry and a bunch of other things.
And offshoring was another offshoring was another theme that we talked about in terms of big transitions, and at least the corporate world. There's a bit of a difference maybe nowadays with people interacting in a remote hybrid socially as well. But with at least the corporate world, there was a bit of a shift with offshoring and this idea that you'd have these pucks on the table of your conference room, and you'd have conference calls with people halfway around the world and negotiating time zones and that sort of thing, working asynchronously as well. People getting used to that kind of a cadence. That was a bit of a shift, but it's very different from the COVID-19, and Cheryl, you were sharing some interesting thoughts about how it's more than just we're all in it together. There's sort of an existential threat to our health, to our safety, and that coupled with this idea of business continuity made for a very interesting kind of way of getting through it as a group in terms of navigating that change curve, but also leading to maybe some new ways of working and new ways of managing people asynchronously or over Zoom and a remote hybrid, but also, near and dear to my heart, how we can make change happen easier, how we can make change happen better, take advantage of these technologies, things like that.
Absolutely. And the offshoring was people on your team working towards common goals. You didn't necessarily see them on video. They might have been on the other side of the world. It was that asynchronous work environment. There was an expectation, I think, especially in the East Coast, New York City, specifically, that the rest of the world would accommodate the hours on the East Coast. But that technology in the 90s enabled us, from Mrs. Fields to making, IPOs on the other side of the world. Also, the idea that those were project-oriented goals. Then COVID came. There was this specter of physical harm. Nobody had all the answers. We were thrown into that video conferencing environment where we just had to make it work. And that brought a certain grace to the learning curves to that was a huge change. And now today we're talking about for part two, almost it's kind of it's a bit meta, right? We're talking about making change happen in this changed environment, which is not really new anymore. The remote and hybrid environment, right. To your point, Rich.
Sure. Yep. And so you brought up, technology. Actually, something that just came to mind was how fast the technology, how rapidly it changed during the pandemic, especially, Zoom. And I remember there were like security issues and stuff like that had to be rapidly developed, right? And that rolled out en masse to all these users, right?
Sorry, Rich, not to interrupt, but not just the tech, but also how rapidly humans were adapting to this new way of interacting.
Right. And we had to acclimate, kids in school to all of this. We at the time we had to acclimate people who had not had to use this technology because they just went to the office every day. We had to acclimate all those people to this, right? And the feelings were all over the place.
Right. Is there a public learning curve too, right? We all sort of had to fumble through it together, and that's where that grace came into it. But there was an arc to that too, right? Those who adapted more quickly or, had the mute button left on less frequently, through a series of different kind of signaling kind of rose, in their own sort of, not rose to the front of the class, but there were obviously people who were getting through it more quickly than others.
Yep. Shoot, I'm still short story, everybody. Confession time. I'm still fumbling through this. There's that, right? So
is there a party somewhere?
Back in the day, I was gonna go for a run, and I was gonna but then I had a meeting, right? So I'm busy, all business on the top, and I'm ready to go out for a run on the bottom there.
The jogging party on the bottom.
The jogging party on the bottom, right? Yeah. But one other thing to bring up here, right, is I'm going to confess something about this episode, right? We're laughing because we just did an hour's worth of what we thought was a recording, and because this guy right here didn't press the record button, we're coming to you. This is actually our second run at this, but this is the reality that we live in. There's a certain level of competence and
grace.
Well, yeah, we have to kind of roll with that, right? Like
Ben and I are signaling a lot of accommodation and care and compassion for you, Rich, because you are always the man behind the curtain for every episode, and we appreciate that every single time. So this was bound to happen at some point. So there we are.
I'm sure that's right. Yeah. And I appreciate your patience on that. And and this is exactly it, right? I think the most successful changes that happen within an organization are when there is some degree of acceptance that those kinds of mistakes happen, and we can move forward, knowing that we can improve our competencies and get things back on track.
Right, and the world didn't end either, right? It kind of resets our structure of expectations too, right? What's important and what isn't,
Sure. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break.
Hey, everybody, from your host at the Harmonious Workplaces podcast.
We're dropping episode 35 soon, and this one is big. We're featuring Russ Lang, co-founder of CMG, a growth consultancy helping organizations transform, grow, and thrive. CMG is all about helping clients see and capture the opportunities behind the numbers, accelerating profitable revenue growth. Russ is here to share how to turn change doubters into allies by breaking through the people-side blockers that limit growth. Get ready to hear how Russ and his team use their unique approach to help companies achieve lasting results. Trust us, you won't want to miss this one. Tune in to learn more about turning skepticism into success. Episode 35, Converting Change Doubters to Allies, drops soon. Until then, make change your friend. And we're back. So we've been talking about navigating the remote hybrid work environments, and let's talk about the generational differences. Yeah, let's bring that in here.
Yeah, and not so much from a people being more adept with technology, stereotypes, or that kind of stuff. Sure. But I think one thing I've noticed is just that there's a willingness to share more. And I think, Rich, you had pointed out that people are more willing to just be themselves. And Cheryl, you pointed out that people are more comfortable sharing potential mental health issues that would never have been on the table before. And you both pointed out how there's this expectation that the company that they're working for, the organization that they're working for, is supposed to support them in their needs, in their journey as an employee. And I think there's something about openness and authenticity that's different in younger folks that are newer to the workforce than at least people that are kind of ones that I grew up with in kind of my generation, and then also my parents' generation. They, I think about my parents and their working lives. They got to know certain people at work, but it took a long time, and it wasn't everyone that they started to become friendly with. And that screen or that separation between personal and work was pretty solid for most of their working careers, with one or two little exceptions here and there that developed over a longer time. And I feel like there's almost no difference now between personal and work. Who you are at work, who you are in person, it's the same thing. There's no separation. You can see what's behind me. You can hear the dogs barking or whatever. And there's a sense that this is who I am. This is me bringing myself to work authentically, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And I expect you, company, organization, to do that and support me in that journey. And so I think there's something in that. And then as a change agent, I think there's something that we can take advantage of there to maybe boost that shared journeyness and get people through that change curve a little differently. It's not on the tip of my tongue yet, but I'm curious what you guys are thinking, if any of that resonates.
It's beautifully said, Ben. Go ahead, Rich.
I was just going to say, it makes me think how inauthentic this screen behind me is, right? Because back here, there is all kinds of chaos that you don't need to be seeing.
There's guitars that we want to see, and banjos and
there's
ukuleles.
There's an orchestra of drums.
There truly is, but it's distracting and it's a little chaotic. But you're right. The people have grown up with. And when I say grow up, I mean literally they have gone through school and the like. With all of that their environment being out there for everybody to see, and they're comfortable with that to some extent, right? But when they haven't been comfortable, they're able to shut it off too, right? And there is some degree of that as well. How can we bring that kind of thing into when they come back into the office? And because they come to expect that, right? When I say they, it's not just that younger generation, although it's largely probably is, but how can we make that so that it more meets their expectations so they can be engaged?
Coming into the office, there are advantages that the younger generation is just experiencing since COVID has swept through, right? That in person, having a desk, free coffee, I think was the joke that NPR highlighted recently. You know, these younger workers and employees are experiencing this kind of environment. It will be curious to see, I will be curious to see how that plays out over the next 10 to 20 years for them. And will companies get more stringent about having people in person, or will the work from home accommodations end up taking hold and being the majority of environments? It will be very interesting to see. But the younger generations are also more adept at taking advantage of digital resources. So video conferencing for them is easier. And I don't want to generalize or stereotype them either, Ben. I think that was a very good point that you made in the beginning. But it's a fact that mental health as a topic has become much more easy to talk about. So this idea that if you are working from home, if you feel isolated, if you feel anxious, if you feel out of the loop, there should be resources within that organization or that company that helps alleviate. There's an expectation that if I am to work remotely and I have those feelings, that I will have support within the infrastructure. It goes with the same with the technology. I'll have that support with the IT. I'll have the communication from my leaders. There'll be an open door policy, even if there's no real door. I will be able to communicate my questions about the change initiative that's coming through. You know, all of those things have to remain intact no matter where you're working from. Right?
Sure.
And touching on signaling, again, we have a signaling white paper that we're working on that we'll be distributing through Harmonious Workplaces soon. There's a lot of signaling that is even more intense when you are working remotely, in that you don't turn your camera off. You don't eat on screen. You are not late. You raise your hand. You know, these are all respectful elements of signaling in the remote environment that are expected to keep that respect and professionalism, despite a potentially messy background, despite my cat walking through the room, right? Despite the garbage truck coming, right? There has to be a balance between both.
And I think it works well when companies state that up front in terms of when they're bringing someone on board as part of their hiring process, their onboarding process, state just very clearly that there's a hybrid environment here while you are in a hybrid meeting or a Zoom meeting, or, you know, when you're working remotely. The expectation is that when you're in a meeting, you're on camera, your camera's on, you have a reasonably tidy background, you're in a relatively quiet space. If there's confidential information, you know, I do a lot of work in healthcare. If there's sensitive patient information or proprietary information you're sharing about a drug being developed, you don't have that broadcast on your screen in a Starbucks environment, or you don't have that broadcast to the world for everyone to see. There's some sort of decorum and professionalism there. At the same time, it's okay to have your coffee, or it's okay to be drinking your water, you know, that kind of stuff. And companies are generally very good, at least the better ones I've seen are very good about building in break time, building in time for bio breaks, for lunch breaks, for things like that, just like you might have seen years ago at a conference where it's very scheduled. And there's an expectation that people will need some downtime, that they'll need to take a break to refresh themselves, that kind of thing. And nowadays at conferences, you see time baked in for people to catch up on work or check emails, things like that. So they're doing that instead of networking. In the hybrid environment, I think people try to build that time in so that if you're stuck in meetings for most of the day, you do have some time to react to urgent needs of your colleagues without necessarily being dragged off or trying to do too much multitasking.
Right.
So it sounds like, being organizations that can make these blended environments work best are the ones that are more intentional, about how they do this. So seems being able to understand who we have working with us and what their needs are, and where they're coming from, and then adapting, with some degree of planning. How are we going to effectively communicate out what we need to have happen, but also allow for that feedback to come back? So we've talked a lot about that in other episodes.
Yeah, the feedback loop.
The feedback loop, right? How do we keep that data coming back to us so that we can continue to be intentional about how we manage? I mean, it's change projects, but even our day-to-day operation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a coordination element. Sorry, Cheryl, I cut you.
No, absolutely. And I was just going to agree with what you're both saying. That intentionality that intentionality to accommodate everyone that is working in this kind of situation is expected, right? And because of that, when it's not there, this can erode the successfulness. That can diminish the success of the working environment, not to speak of the success of a change initiative being put through that remote environment, right?
Yeah. So as we're coming up on time here, what would you say? What's something that let's kind of do a little bit of a round robin. Something you can offer that maybe from your experience or from what you've learned, a tip or something actionable that an organization can do to better manage change within this hybrid or work environment.
I have to say communication, no matter what the environment is that you work in. It's the broken record that I am about communication. I'm not going to talk about psychological safety, but communication is a key part of that too, and the environments that we're talking about. But expectations, timelines, what change is coming, why it's coming, who's expected to be a part of it, all of those things, basic communication still has to be as strong, if not stronger, in hybrid and remote situations, and consistent.
Yep. Ben, what are your thoughts?
I was thinking a little bit from a leadership or a manager perspective. One thing that folks could do is be more proactive about being in touch with people on their teams, taking advantage of something like a chat channel or a Teams channel, and just reaching out and being more proactive about those check-ins and getting to know each person's working style and working hours, ways of working, things like that, and not necessarily badgering someone, but just checking in a little bit more or a little bit more intentionally to see how that person is doing, to see what help they need or what roadblocks they need moved, since that's essentially your job as the manager. And doing that in a way that's maybe different from just saying, hey, my door's open, come by anytime, where 20 years ago that might have worked when we were all in the office. Now it's a little different. You have to sort of extend that door and that invitation to sort of like sea anemone, pull people in kind of a thing, and do it that way. Maybe also part of that is saying very clearly in your schedule, most people can see your schedules online nowadays. These are open hours, open office hours, come by, grab a virtual coffee, whatever, and just making it very clear that that's the purpose of that. And there's some almost expectation that people on the team will come by and at least say hello, share something about what their cat was doing over the weekend. And, if there's a work issue, great. But if not, it builds that camaraderie.
Right.
Yep.
And I'll say, maybe it's playing a little bit off of what Cheryl said, add a little bit off of what you said, Ben, from a communication standpoint and from setting expectations. I think of it sometimes coming from a marketing perspective, right? Where we have to think about our personas, like who are we talking to, and what drives them, what motivates them, what are their likes and dislikes, and then the communication channels that we're going to use, and the technology that drives that. Can we do more leveraging that technology to do things that are in our previous discussion that we didn't record, Ben mentioned asynchronous communication, where we have where people are not talking in real time right now, right? So I found that being able to take videos or screen capture videos to be able to communicate that over a Slack channel or a Zoom or a Teams, not Zoom, but Teams, where or Asana or something to that effect, where people can still have some level of the interpersonal connection with somebody, right? But then can play off of that and respond through text messaging, within that program or whatever. But I think it all comes down to being intentional about how we plan and structure that, and that's going to come from analyzing, what data we have coming in.
If we're going to set it up,
I like it.
If that is important. If we're going to set it up meaningfully, yep.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, we hope that our listeners got a little nugget of information and wisdom there. And please let us know what you think. And if you have more ideas about how you manage change in a hybrid work environment, we'd love to hear from you. So until we meet again, who wants to take us out today? How about you, Ben?
Make change your friend.
Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.